Hi, folks. Now, it's no surprise to anyone with a shred of common sense that over the last couple of years, Candace Owens has had a complete, full-blown meltdown. I honestly don't know any other way to describe it. It started with her launching this personal vendetta against the Jews, largely as a reaction to her firing from the Daily Wire and her anger toward her former boss, Ben Shapiro. And that just so happened to coincide with the Hamas-Israel war and a major shift in American sentiment toward the Israeli government and Jewish influence in America. So needless to say, Candace benefited enormously from pumping out these sort of Jewish conspiracy videos. However, shortly after that, though, she pivoted straight into unhinged conspiracy theory territory, spending months talking about Brigitte Macron and repeating claims from a fringe French journalist alleging that Brigitte was secretly a man who transitioned young and groomed the current president of France. And again, Candace dragged this out for months, citing circumstantial fragments and this vague, mystical notion of evidence. And to be completely honest, folks, this investigation into French politics felt harmless, even memeish, because for most Americans, it was all low stakes. Who cares about French politics, the French president, and the French first lady? But eventually, Candace got sued by them. And in the last few weeks, as we'll see in a moment, she's now claiming there's a hit out on her, ordered by Emmanuel and Brigitte Macron, the very people suing her. She says she has sources as high level as President Trump himself confirming that Candace has a hit on her head. All that being said, Candace isn't one to shy away from finding a new target. And so over the last 3 months, ever since Charlie Kirk was assassinated, Candace has launched a whole new conspiracy theory. She's been running a long series accusing Turning Point USA and even Charlie Kirk's wife, Erica, of being involved in orchestrating Charlie's assassination for personal gain. And once again, she presents virtually no evidence outside of selectively shared text messages between herself and Charlie or people at Turning Point, so-called leaks, receipts, but nothing more than circumstantial scraps, some ethereal idea of evidence that would never hold up in court. But that hasn't stopped Candace from going full speed ahead with this narrative. And look, it's gotten so insane that she's now apparently citing her dreams as evidence. And yes, I am not even joking with this one.
Had a vivid dream this weekend, and Charlie came to me and he told me that he was betrayed. And so for me, you don't have to believe that, but I do believe that. And it was the immediate sense I got, actually. And I don't know who exactly it is that betrayed him, but I also felt in the dream that it is soon going to be revealed, that it's actually inevitable that it is going to be revealed, that there is nothing and no one that is going to stop the truth from coming out, and it is going to have international consequences. Take that to the bank. Quote me on that.
Candace really needs to drop the whole female intuition act, because nobody needs to hear about quote-unquote evidence she claims came to her in a dream while she sits right in front of Jesus dying on the cross, projecting spiritual authority while delivering pure fantasy. This isn't journalism or investigation, folks. It's emotional storytelling dressed up as truth. She's throwing out accusations of conspiracy and betrayal based on nothing more than a gut feeling and a dream. And that's not a rational form of discourse. That's just theatrical manipulation. What really stands out is the way she weaponizes intuition to manufacture consensus with her largely female audience, appealing to emotion instead of evidence, relying on the fact that emotional reasoning bypasses critical thinking. See, according to the American Psychological Association, emotional reasoning is one of the most powerful cognitive distortions because it replaces objective verification with subjective feeling, allowing people to believe something is true simply because they feel it's true. And according to Jonathan Hayes' research on moral institution, once people form an institution-based belief, they tend to defend it regardless of contradictory evidence. That's the psychological vulnerability she's exploiting at the moment. Her largely female and very parasocial online audience are more receptive to narrative than proof. This isn't connection, folks. It's just pure control. Building consensus through intuition rather than facts creates an environment where disagreement feels like betrayal and skepticism. It feels like personal disrespect. And research on parasocial influence shows that audiences under this dynamic become more loyal, more reactive, and more emotionally invested precisely because their leaders' claims feel personal to them. That's how cult dynamics begin to form, and that's the real danger here, folks. Candace isn't just misleading people. She's conditioning them to treat her feelings as evidence and her dreams as exact data. So what we're witnessing isn't simply one influencer unraveling. It's a reflection of a broader cultural collapse in truth standards. See, emotional certainty has become more persuasive than factual accuracy. People are exhausted, distrustful, and overwhelmed. And in that environment, intuition-based narratives become comforting shortcuts. But when emotional appeal becomes the primary tool of influence, institutions' public discourse deteriorates, and truth becomes purely optional. And it gets even worse, folks, because Candace appears to be weirdly invested in humiliating Charlie posthumously and his wife Erica currently. Maybe out of jealousy, maybe out of resentment, maybe out of some deeper insecurity. I'm really not going to sit here and pathologize her motives, but the pattern is obvious. She keeps dredging up private messages between herself and Charlie, spinning elaborate conspiracies and tearing at the image of Charlie and Erica's relationship and Turning Point itself for no real reason other than self-aggrandizement.
I'm going to miss Charlie going on dates and the girls they liked and me always being the wing woman and him asking. This text message is one of my favorite text messages between me and Charlie when he was getting ready to go on a date. And, he didn't date many people. And he was just kind of in love with this girl. And he was asking me, should I wear this? And this is the text message. It's so sweet. He said, do I have to change this shirt? And I wrote back, yes, and throw it away if you can. Charlie, and he writes,
What's the point? Seriously, why is Candace sharing private conversations Charlie had with her years before he was brutally assassinated? Conversations clearly never intended for public consumption, while he currently has a widow and 2 children who now have to watch his memory dragged into this circus. Well, the reason is obvious, folks. Candace is using these texts to lend herself credibility by showing her proximity to Charlie. No matter how limited or outdated that proximity actually was, she's building her reputation as a trusted insider. It doesn't matter if she and Charlie grew estranged in recent years. It doesn't matter if this was one of the 10 meaningless exchanges over half a decade. The tactic is strategic. Look, folks, he confided in me. He asked what shirt to wear. I was important in his life. That's how parasocial authority is constructed. According to the American Psychological Association, people are more likely to view someone as a reliable source when that person presents themselves as emotionally close to a figure the audience admires. And according to research on narrative persuasion, inserting oneself into someone else's intimate moments, even selectively or out of context, creates the illusion of insider knowledge, which increases perceived credibility even when the information has no actual relevance to the truth claims being made. Now, what Candace is also doing here is a classic example of emotional anchoring. She's taking a trivial personal moment and using it as a psychological bridge to convince her largely female and parasocial audience that she had privileged access to the real Charlie, and therefore her current claims must carry special weight. According to studies on social cognition, when audiences see private messages or intimate anecdotes, they tend to drop their critical defenses because the content feels personal, nostalgic, and human. That sense of closeness suppresses skepticism. And that's the real danger here, folks. She's leveraging sentimentality as a rhetorical shield to legitimize narratives that have nothing to do with the screenshot she's showing. What we're watching is not a tribute to a friend in that clip. It's reputational laundering. It's the weaponization of memory to manufacture trust in her audience. And in a moment where most people around the world on the internet are already struggling to distinguish between truth and performance, this kind of manipulative storytelling doesn't just mislead, it erodes the possibility of honest public discourse entirely. Now, needless to say, there is a reckoning gaining momentum as of the last few months, and Candace has been having her hypocrisies exposed online to a greater degree, especially as of the last few weeks. And this video specifically shows one of her more egregious lies.
When your life is under threat because a certain government wants to assassinate you, guess what you do? You don't hide, you don't get extra security, you go to Christmas parties. You make sure that you take pictures with everyone there, just so the French government, who apparently wants to assassinate you, knows exactly where you're at. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, just a week ago, Candace Owens said that her life is under threat because she uncovered an assassination plot against her by the French government. She knew every single detail about this assassination plot. She even knew that one of the individuals was Israeli, of course. But again, a French assassination assassination plot against you shouldn't stop you from going out and enjoying your time around Christmas. Or maybe she's enjoying her time at Christmas parties because she said that the President of the United States and our intelligence communities will verify her claim. But since our intel community, which is run by President Trump's administration, has no idea what she's talking about, yes, she felt safe enough to finally come out and go to a Christmas party with all her friends at Tucker Carlson's Christmas party. If only you knew how much money Candace Owens makes on YouTube because you give her views, you would start to question whether this is an actual grift. Those of us who earn money on YouTube know that this is a grift.
Now, the irony in this situation is that Candace has somehow managed to unite the right and the left in her crusade against Turning Point. People on the left are practically perched on the edge of their seats, thrilled to watch the conservative coalition tear itself apart. And the hilarious part is that the left is eagerly buying into a very obvious grift from Candace. The same left, by the way, that reflexively labels anyone on the right a grifter with absolutely zero evidence. I get called a grifter all the time, even though I make basically no money from this content that I produce and get nothing out of it other than doing it for the love of the game. Meanwhile, someone who serves the left's deeper political desire to fracture the conservative movement can make wild, evidence-free accusations, claim that Turning Point was an inside job, that the French government is plotting to assassinate her, and then show up smiling at Christmas parties without a shred of fear or consistency, and Democrats will applaud it because it benefits their narrative. And that tells you everything about the current information ecosystem. Truth no longer matters as much as utility. According to research on motivated reasoning, people will accept claims they know are questionable if those claims weaken their perceived opposing side. That's what we're watching here, folks. A world where emotional spectacle overrides proof, where bad faith accusations become entertainment, and where someone can lie shamelessly in public for years, contradict themselves in real time, and still be rewarded because the accusation itself is more valuable to the audience than whether it's real. Candace exploiting that dynamic isn't just her problem. It's a window into how degraded political discourse has become in America and how easy the left's influence spreads when chaos inside the conservative movement serves their specific political goals. Now, needless to say, there are a lot of people on the right and on the center that have been calling out Candace Owens as of the last few months. And Tim Pool, notably, has had some of the more pointed points.
No one hated Charlie Kirk more than Candace Owens. She reviles him, she spits on his grave, and she smiles while doing it.
Wow.
Okay, quote over. And I'll say this because Charlie spent his life building out these organizations. Candace is doing everything in her power to tear them down. She hates Charlie. She hates what Charlie built, and she wants it to burn. She hates Charlie's family. She hates Charlie's friends. She's accused them of killing him. She's accused his wife of having knowledge of these events. And then she comes out and says, I never said that. Not in the literal sense, but there's literally no other logical conclusion to what you're saying. So when I look at Colvett, and Bowyer and Blake and Erica and the people who work at Turning Point. And I say, you know, maybe they're not handling things properly and they don't know what to do what Charlie was doing. There's fears that Turning Point can't make it without Charlie. All of that is them trying to make Turning Point survive. Candace is advocating you abandon Turning Point USA. It's kind of remarkable to see, but let's just do the logic here. Simple question for all of you. Throw it in the chat. Who do you think cares more about Turning Point? The people trying to salvage and save it, or the woman telling everybody to pull their donations? Then you can ask yourself this. If Charlie were alive today, what do you think he'd be saying about all of this? Do you think he would say, I don't trust my wife and my best friends to run my organization? Or do you think he'd be saying, Candace should burn down Turning Point USA?
We live in a media environment that does not reward truth, folks. Unfortunately, that's the reality of the world we're currently in. And you see that perfectly illustrated in this whole situation with Candace. And Tim isn't actually revealing anything people haven't already sensed here, to be honest. He's just saying the quiet part plainly. Candace's behavior has made it painfully obvious that no one harbors more contempt for Charlie and what he built than Candace. And Tim is right to highlight the sheer hostility underlying Candace's accusations, accusing his friends, his family, and even his wife of complicity in his death, then pretending she never implied it. That's not analysis. That's scorched earth narcissism. And what Tim is saying about Turning Point struggling to survive without Charlie is actually true. Every organization faces an existential crisis when its founder dies or simply just leaves. But even in that uncertainty, the people trying to salvage the institution are clearly acting out of loyalty, not malice. Meanwhile, Candace is actively telling people to abandon Turning Point, to cut off donations, to let the entire thing burn. And the question Tim raises is the only one that matters. Who actually cares more about the institution? We have to think about that, folks, because at the end of the day, this goes beyond the perceived drama around the situation. We're talking about one of the most effective political institutions in the country in the last decade. One that very successfully helped Trump get elected in 2024. One that very successfully helped turn the tide in most college campuses around the country from rampant leftism to a wave of conservatism that literally saved an entire generation of young men that were being destroyed and pummeled by unfettered feminism. We have to start asking ourselves, who is benefiting from destroying one of the most effective conservative political organizations in the world? Anyway, Candace predictably responded to Tim, specifically some of his claims about how her circus is going to affect the Republican Party in the midterms next year. And this is what Candace had to say.
She's a piece of shit. Because instead of saying, guys, let's come together and figure out how to work together, she says the stupidest, retarded crap. And now everybody's running around divided and broken. For what reason? For literally what reason?
Because they killed Charlie Kirk in broad daylight, and we don't care about your stupid midterms. We just don't care. Like, they really, this is how they view Charlie Kirk. That's what I say. Was anything in his life real? Tim Pool is going off right now because he's like, it's not the time. You guys need to be mules. You need to keep voting in the very corrupt people that are lying to your faces right now about what happened to Charlie Kirk. It is not the time because it is your job to get people into office. This is what I mean when I suggest that nothing in Charlie Kirk's life was real. So he really thinks he's doing something there. And actually what he's doing is proving my point. These people just saw Charlie as a means to an end. Okay? As a political horse that they could ride. And so for whatever reason, they got tired riding him. And now they're angry because they also were going to whip the horse, the ghost of Charlie Kirk, and say, we still need you to shore up votes. And it is inconvenient that people who actually cared about Charlie and saw him as a, I don't know, human being,
You didn't
want to
see
know
him as
why
that?
he
What
was
are you
publicly
saying?
executed in front of us and why we're being lied to about everything. That is why Tim Pool is upset, because midterms, it's going to be my fault, not the fault of the feds for feeding us BS. It's not going to be the fault of Turning Point USA.
You're feeding the
for
BS, dude.
lying and thinking that they're brighter than us and seemingly not caring about the investigation. It's not going to be the fault of, I don't know, maybe actual politicians like Donald Trump, who's the president of the United States, and look us in the face and said, are we still talking about the Epstein files? No, that's not his fault. The fault is Candace Owens for wanting to figure out who murdered her friend. Don't you guys get it? Like, we're just an algorithm. Why do you care so much about humans? Like, why are you a human? Like, if somebody in your family dies, you need to focus on midterms, okay? That is the point of a Tim Pool show. It doesn't matter what you are going through at home. I want you guys to hear this, okay? I don't care if you have family members that are dying, family members who have died, if you have children that you care about and you maybe don't want to live in a world that's run by pedophiles. You need to put that all aside and vote for whoever the hell Tim Pool tells you to vote for. I just want to platform that idea. I think obviously there's something wrong with me, and Tim Pool's got it figured out. His soul seems like it's really intact and it's not for sale at all.
At no point does she form anything resembling a logical argument grounded in any sort of truth. She's just saying things, stacking one emotional trigger on top of another to justify tearing apart a political organization without a shred of evidence. She drags in midterms as if there's some trivial inconvenience when in reality you should care about midterms if you're invested in preserving this country or the values that Candace claims to uphold, unless, of course, her values quietly changed or never existed in the first place. And all of this is simply a paycheck to her, which, let's be honest, that's probably what's happening here. What she's doing is, in fact, classic emotional redirection. According to research on rhetorical manipulation, when a speaker floods the audience with moral outrage, personal grief, and cultural pressure points, it disables analytical reasoning and makes listeners more susceptible to narrative over fact. That's exactly why she brings up Trump and the Epstein files, even though Trump recently pushed for the Epstein documents to be released and signed the bipartisan legislation authorizing it, which means her entire point collapses on contact with reality. But the tactic works because she's not making actual arguments, folks. She's activating trauma clusters. Every reference she makes, assassination plots, political corruption, grieving families, pedophiles, human suffering, is designed to overwhelm skepticism and reframe herself as a lone truth teller fighting a corrupt machine. It's emotional absolutism masquerading as political commentary. And this moment reveals something deeper about our current media moment. See, when narratives become more powerful than actual facts, when emotional spectacle outweighs civic responsibility, and when influencers treat destabilizing the right as entertainment, the left doesn't have to do anything. The fragmentation happens automatically. Candace isn't exposing corruption, folks. She's exposing how vulnerable our political discourse and our media ecosystem have become to manipulation dressed up as some weird form of so-called moral insight. All that being said, folks, something notable that Candace recently did was go on her show and make some demands from Turning Point USA, and this is what she had to say.
Refusing to have a conversation with me, and you know that I cared about Charlie. Have you no shame? We're going to find out. You can pick the place. You can pick the time. I say we do it tomorrow. We don't need to plan for this. We don't need lawyers in between us, lawyer statements. It's not how I roll, okay? I don't care about any of that. I want it to be authentic. Like I said, you can take the money. We can raise money live for this conversation. That is how badly the world is demanding it. So I accept it with whistles and bells, everything. I fully accept.
And Turning Point responded, acknowledging Candace's offer and setting in motion a public back and forth that unfolded entirely on X. The sequence began when Blake Neff, the producer of the Charlie Kirk show, announced that a live stream had been scheduled for Monday, December 15th at 4 p.m. Eastern. He stated the event would feature several of Charlie's friends responding to statements Candace Owens had made, and reiterated that Candace was welcome to join them in Phoenix if she confirmed her attendance by the end of the day. Candace replied by questioning why she learned about the live stream publicly rather than through a direct call or email. She explained that December 15th would not work for her to attend in person, and added that the scheduled time coincided with her daily live podcast, something she said the Turning Point team knew. Still, she offered to cancel her show and participate virtually if that option worked for them. Blake Neff responded by clarifying that Turning Point had already decided to deliver their formal response on December 15th, acknowledged Candace's indication that she would not attend in person, and stated the live stream would proceed without her. Candace then announced that based on public sentiment, her team would instead live stream Turning Point's event and provide live commentary during it, noting that Turning Point USA had chosen the exact time slot of her regular broadcast. She closed by saying they look forward to providing live responses to Turning Point's presentation. And then she said this on Instagram.
So Turning Point issued an ultimatum, I don't know, an invitation, gave me 24 hours to respond to a tweet that they sent at midnight. Very strange. Again, everything just seems to be very strange and unnecessary that is coming out of Turning Point USA. We're going to find out. You can pick the place. You can pick the time. I say we do it tomorrow. We don't need to plan for this. We don't need lawyers in between us, lawyer statements. It's not how I roll, okay? I don't care about any of that. I want it to be authentic. Like, we are going to discuss that. Plus, I have an amazingly odd update regarding the Egyptian planes, and it feels very significant. So we're going to jump back into that storyline. It seems to be the Egyptian planes that they are unnecessarily freaking out about. So that's definitely going to be the key that unlocks everything.
This woman sounds objectively retarded. What is she even talking about? Egyptian planes? This is how far she's fallen down the conspiracy rabbit hole. She's stringing together random imagery and presenting it as revelation. But none of this is surprising, folks. It was obvious this is where these things were headed, because Candace doesn't actually want a debate. She wants the illusion of one. She's publicly saying, pick the place, pick the time, and then just hours later claims it's strange and unnecessary for Turning Point to do exactly what she demanded from them. That's not confusion, folks. It's just scared avoidance. She benefits far more from staying inside her insulated bubble, where she can spin stories, inject mystique into nonsense like Egyptian plane clues, and never face a single evidentiary standard of real challenge. According to research on echo chambers, people who rely on parasocial trust instead of factual authority lose influence the moment they enter a setting where their claims can be questioned, which is precisely why she keeps retreating. And the only way to puncture that bubble is for people to expose her reasoning, break down her tactics, and refuse to let emotional theatrics masquerade as truth. Because this isn't just internet drama, folks. This has real political ramifications. We are heading into what may be the most consequential midterms of the next decade, shaping the final 2 years of Trump's presidency and determining whether Republicans can build a stable coalition ahead of 2028. The last thing the country needs is a self-inflicted fracture that hands power back to Democrats. And if anyone thinks America is prepared for a Gavin Newsom presidency, they're kidding themselves. This kind of performative chaos weakens the right at exactly the moment unity matters most. Now, before I get into my reasoning as to the timing of this strategic fracture of the right, let's look at Candace's response to Turning Point and their offer to come on their show and discuss her theories with them.
We plan to walk through everything carefully and thoroughly. If Candace is available, we would sincerely welcome her participation in that live stream at our studio here in Phoenix. At this point, we believe the ball is back in her court. Our motivation for doing this is not out of any obligation to Candace. It is about honoring Charlie. We feel a deep responsibility to protect his legacy, his work, and the truth. I feel that. I owe Charlie everything in my life. I feel it immensely. And that is why we feel compelled to speak clearly and openly now. We'll have more on this in the near future.
Yay! Finally! You didn't have to get through all that shade that you were throwing me to get to the point that you were willing to answer questions, okay? Because that's what Charlie did for a living. How could you guys think that you were just going to continue on and pretend like people asking meaningful questions was somehow an attack? That's what he did for a living. He stood up on college campuses and he debated people. And he sat there principally and debated people because he felt that he had the moral high ground, okay? And that if those people disagreed with him, he could bring them over to his side. You guys have been actually acting and embodying the opposite of Charlie Kirk's spirit.
Everything she said is not only a false equivalence, it's a complete mischaracterization of what Charlie actually did. Going to college campuses to debate people on principles, philosophy, ideas, and politics is nothing like engaging with someone who is actively and deliberately trying to undermine your organization from within by spreading slanderous allegations for profit. That is what Candace is doing. It is categorically different. And in Charlie's own words, he refused to engage with trolls, which is why he wouldn't even mention Nick Fuentes on his show. Not that Nick is a troll. He's not a troll. It's because Charlie viewed him as one. That dynamic helped fuel the Groyper War with Turning Point and escalated everything because Charlie's refusal to acknowledge Nick's existence became a pressure point. And this is a common tactic across media. People stay inside their bubbles specifically so they never have to be held accountable or debate critics who challenge their ideas. Or worse, people who are actively trying to damage them and their reputations. Hassan Piker does the same thing. So when you stay in your bubble, you don't have to answer to anyone.
That's what you guys don't understand. You're not attacking me. You are attacking millions of people around the world who watched a man, an innocent man, be publicly executed and then watched what felt very much like the state collude to feed us absolute horseshit about what took place on that day. Okay? 30-06 bullets do not get stopped by human necks because they eat healthy. They don't. And yes, you guys are a part of that apparatus of people who made us feel, and you've expressed it here, like you were too good to answer questions. We are already said, I got on stage and I told you that I'm Charlie's pastor. I told you I'm his best friend. I told you, you guys have even allowed people to inject themselves into his legacy that Charlie didn't even like. And we're supposed to believe you're doing this because you're his friend, because you're committed to truth. You sat there and allowed the very people who pressured Charlie towards the end of his life to try to claim his whole legacy. And you're pretending we are the ones that are immoral? You're upset because you got caught lying. You're upset because you got caught with your pants down, but you cannot blame me for that, okay? These were your own errors. These were your own lies. And I was not going for a single second to let up on the pressure. In fact, I have been so strategic that I've been holding on to certain information, hoping that you would acquiesce to have a public conversation because I want to look you in the eye and I want to challenge you to lie to me because I care deeply about what happened to Charlie on that day. I don't think we're getting the truth. And I do believe that because you are not forthcoming about the information that you have about Charlie texting you guys and saying that he thought he was going to be assassinated that very next day, okay? The day that he died, Charlie knew, said he thinks he was going to be killed tomorrow. And you guys are sitting on that information. So I'm the right person. Yeah, I'm the right person to sit across from you and to ask you questions, right? Some things that you told me on that day, they're not adding up.
I genuinely don't know how people can watch her for hours every day because the only thing that comes through the screen now is the overwhelming sense of arrogance and contempt she has. You can feel how much she looks down on the very people she claims to be fighting for, how this supposed moral crusade to expose the truth about Charlie is wrapped in a tone that is openly condescending. And yet the irony is impossible to ignore. Her mission to uncover what really happened to Charlie somehow requires destroying everything Charlie worked to build. Why? Why does her pursuit of truth demand scorched earth? Why refuse to wait for an investigation? Why assume she knows more than everyone else based on circumstantial scraps she has already been wrong about? She told her audience a man at the scene was sending a signal to assassinate Charlie, only to be proven wrong when it turned out he was just answering his phone or was holding his phone in his hand or something. A normal moment reframed as a murder plot for content. It is unbelievable that this passes as commentary now. And this is where the danger lies, folks. We trained an entire generation of people to recognize manipulation in the mainstream media, but we are now living in an era where independent influencers have learned to use those same psychological tools, emotional escalation, pattern seeking, conspiratorial framing, moral absolutism, to build parasocial authority and control the narrative. According to research on digital misinformation, this style of content thrives because it replaces analysis with certainty, turning speculation into moral righteousness. And the left benefits from this fracture inside the right. They don't have to weaken conservative institutions if voices on the right are already doing it themselves. This moment isn't just about Candace spinning conspiracies, by the way. It's a symptom of a media ecosystem where outrage is profitable, truth is optional, and destruction of one's own coalition becomes some perverted source of entertainment. Candace Owens is a bad actor, folks. There's no beating around the bush with this one. And I can't say she hates America for sure because I do believe she actually does love this country, but I don't think she loves America nearly as much as she loves money. That's what's driving this entire spectacle. She is being handsomely rewarded with unprecedented public attention and, yes, a very real boost from YouTube and the broader social media ecosystem. And let's be honest about the incentives at play. After YouTube was exposed years ago for banning conservative creators outright, the platform shifted to subtler, quieter methods of filtering out voices that don't fit the ideological mold favored by its overwhelmingly very progressive engineering class. We're talking about people left of Mao here, folks. That shadow filtering has crushed countless creators. I personally know people whose channels collapsed the moment they started leaning conservative, even creators who previously thrived as leftists. And yet Candace's numbers surge while the rest of conservative media declines. Tim Pool has talked about experiencing it. The Daily Wire has talked about experiencing it. And conservative creators across the board have acknowledged that the numbers look unusually suppressed, except for one person in the conservative sphere. So the question becomes unavoidable, folks. Why would a platform run by people who openly tilt far left of Mao elevate her above all others? What message does she espouse and how is it useful to them? What fractures are beneficial to them? And if institutions like YouTube, owned by Google, by the way, a company that has repeatedly made errors in ways that help Democrats at critical elections, have the power to tilt public discourse, what does it mean when they appear to reward the one conservative voice showing chaos inside her own movement? You don't have to agree with my interpretation, folks, but you should at least ask yourself why the only conservative commentator thriving on platforms run by ideologues left of Mao is the one tearing the coalition apart. What does that say about how information is curated in America? What does it say about how easily our political movements can be destabilized from within by social media platforms? And most importantly, how much of what we're watching is actually organic and how much of it is engineered? If we don't start questioning the narratives handed to us by institutions with agendas, we're volunteering to let entertainment, lies, and division decide the fate of our country. which desperately needs clarity right now. Anyway, you tell me what you think in the comments down below. Hope you have a terrific day. Peace.